Well, welcome back to the shop. If you can see behind me, we've got an engine in a frame, and it's got exhaust. And it's even got some drive shafts. So basically, chassis is pretty much good to go. Everything's on. Basically, radiator all the way back to the exhaust tips. Um, Tried to button up everything we could before we get the tub in place, because obviously you got a lot more working room, hence the drive shafts and stuff. Otherwise, everything's good. Did have to chase a little bit of whoop. There were a couple of weeps on the front timing cover. They're kind of notorious on the 2Fs. They've got a tin cover that's not always the most fun to work on, but managed to track those down, which is why we ran it a little bit longer without the body in place. Because again, if you had to pull the timing cover, it's easy right now. It's 2 bolts to pull the radiator, pop the hoses. It's just got water in it instead of coolant. It's a lot easier to do that now versus once you've got all the front clip on. But luckily managed to just kind of snug those bolts, and a couple needed a little bit of goop, and away they go. So we're sitting pretty good on the chassis. Time to start working on getting the tub all ready to go. There's a little bit of stuff to do on that before you put it on the frame. There's some brake lines that run across the firewall, as well as the clutch lines. Some heat shielding underneath we got to do, stuff like that. So just a lot of prep work before we can dunk that on the rear end. But hopefully get all the prep work done today and maybe dunk the tub on tomorrow, and have her on this week basically, which will be another big milestone. So that's where we're at. Gonna go start nipping away on some of the parts and pieces and get them onto the tub. Onward. So one of those kind of important pieces is brakes and clutch, and these were a little bit crusty. I had basically a half hour or an hour the other day, just ripped through them, ran them through the blaster, got them all clean, put a coat of paint on, and just popped these rubber feet back on. Just a quick hitter there. I'll dunk a before shot. She was a little crusty. Pedals weren't too bad, although they take a beating on the lower part where you got salty boots in the winter. It just kind of creeps its way up and chews them up a little bit. Same way with the upper bracketry. The brake master ended up weeping, so then you got shmoo coming down from where the master would be, and it just made a bit of a mess up there too. The clutch master might have done the same thing. They both had their years of fun. But anyway, ran them through the cabinet, got them all nice and clean. So pretty quick there. Everything else, luckily, is pretty good. The hardware is still nice and clean, so don't have to do with that. Hardware is one of the things that really slows you down when you try and get it clean. If you get everything nice, then you put a big rusty bolt back in. Kind of defeats the point. Switch just needs a little bit of a bath. She's got a little bit of dust on her, but we can do that quick. But we can get this all jammed back together. Just got a bucket of rubber nubs that we got to pop on. There's one for each pedal, so when it comes up it doesn't clank away. This is your brake switch, so it's just got to get popped back in. And the rest of this is just your pivots. I do have the brake vacuum booster all cleaned up, so that's ready to go, and I do have new masters for both the clutch and brake. So all that should be good to go. All that hardware is cleaned up. There were a couple little fittings and stuff that we needed to do. But otherwise, all this is ready to go. We'll get it kind of jammed together in pieces, and then we'll start dunking around the tub. Time to see if we can yank this feller through. Whoop. Come on, friend. Almost. Get out of the way. Boink. Boink. I'll take it. Be right back. He's gonna go get a date with the toothbrush. All better. In she goes. So next up, this is the flasher for the blinkers and hazards. Usually goes, where that feller's at? Oh, it's on this side. So it sits on this side. You can't use this guy with the, I put some LED lights in. It's just a tabbed can. I may crack it open and see. I did get the replacement LED flasher that will work. It's the same pinout for the, should fit the factory harness. I may pop this can open, see if I can yank the guts out, and I may just tuck this guy inside the factory can just to give it a little bit of that, kind of keep the neat tin canister. It's pretty easy to pop it open. Should be able to pluck this board out, and really you should be able to just run some jumpers to these two pins, or even maybe fit her in that way. We'll see. But first things first, got to get this guy out of the way. So it's kind of interesting. So that's, we got two contactors and a cap. Cap's holding it pretty good. A lot of times those electrolytics will kind of explode and weep over time. I think I'm going to leave this guy all together, and I can just put her in a baggie, put her in the spare parts bin. The nice thing is this guy will fit horizontally, so I can basically put the connector right back where it was. I just got to cut out a little plate of some sort of plastic and tuck him in there. And really we should be good to go, which is kind of nice. Be kind of fun to keep the old canister and still be able to put her back to stock for any reason down the road. Just got to nibble off these little slidey feet. Oh, sorry about that. Just to give it the right clearance. That's all that's holding it up right now. But should be able to dunk that guy in there and put a lid on it and call her a day. Gonna go track down something for a lid and be right back. Good as new. Better, actually. Well, different. Depends what you're going for. But that'll work with the LEDs. Good to go. Oh, well, we've got our brake booster, we've got our pedals. Time to start unwrapping the tub and start dunking some of that stuff in there so we can start getting it onto the chassis and get our garage stall back. It's kind of nice. Wink. So I did get a little bit of a jump start. I did relume the main harness. There's a little bit of work left to do on there's a few connectors that need some love here, as you can tell, but until we had it plugged in, no real need to worry too much about them. Otherwise, it's all redone in kind of that Tessa tape. Just kind of nice, tidied it up. It was definitely a greasy mess. I think I've got a few photos of when I did it. I was just kind of one of those late night tasks. Not a whole lot to film on video. A lot of unwrapping, washing, and rewrapping basically. But got that guy tucked up in there and up behind the dash. There's connectors for the instrument cluster, steering wheel, that kind of jazz. Did dunk the fuse box back up in there. Got it run across. Started to plunk a few controls in. They're all pretty much where they need to be. A couple knobs to put on. I do need to snug up these goofy fittings. I just let the paint cure as long as I could. Hello, friend. But otherwise, those should snug up pretty quick. So it's sitting pretty good as far as that stuff goes. It will be nice to get some of the pedal work dunked in. That's why I was working on the boosters and the pedals. I do have the air box that we can do. So this is the engine compartment side. She's a little crusty, as you can tell. So going to have to give that a bath and figure out a little bit of regasketing there. I think I've got some high density foam that I can make a gasket out of, a little bit of wire loom to clean up. So that guy's pretty minor, but that's easy enough to do before we put her on the frame, because conveniently I can stand kind of in this firewall hole, or the transmission hole tunnel, and reach in there and do some of that work without sliding around. So that's kind of where we're at with the tub. I did pick up some blue wrap. I think first things first, I may just run some of that down the sides, because you do have things like buckles and belts and stuff that it just helps to protect that while you're working on it. The paint should have had a decent amount of time to cure. It's been probably 3 weeks now, but it's still nice to throw that protective wrap on. It's easy enough to do. Better safe than sorry. And we can start jamming on that dash, get those foot feet in there, start to get the booster. And then we need to recreate those curly Q lines. They run along the firewall. So they come from your masters over here, kind of bend around, and that's kind of what I want to do before you get the tub on, because pretty soon you're going to have that big old 2F sitting in the middle. But they come across and down pretty much right by this kind of stringer plate, and that's where they meet up with this distribution block for the front and the rears. And then the clutch one just has a bracket, and it goes to this flex line. But that's basically where all your hydraulic fittings are going to come in. But they got to come across the back of the firewall, and I would love to do that before that fella's in the way. So a lot of stuff to do, but nothing too crazy. So we'll start chipping away. First things first, we're going to wrap her up so we don't screw it up, and then we'll probably start chipping away on those masters. So onward. So time to regroup a little bit. So what do we got? So these are for the dash to windshield mounts. Right there for now. This is just a polishing rag. We'll run it through the washer just to make sure it's clean. I think it was there just to catch any of the leftover schmutz. I did print out a copy of the old wiring diagram, so that helps a little bit when you're chasing down where the wiring harness runs, when you can look up a color and go, that's the rear heater, I bet it runs to the back. So that's around, so it's kind of handy. We got some wiring grommets, so we're getting closer to those. Got an empty bag. Empty bag here, which is always a winner, because it means there's parts on the rig that aren't sitting in the basement. And then we just got a few knobs to put back on. So once we snug up the switches, these just have a little itty-bitty set screw. So choke knob isn't going to have a whole lot to do anymore, because we got the Sniper EFI going on. We'll see what we do with it. Might be something we can run that's not a choke, but we'll see. It's kind of there for classic reasons. Kind of interesting. Fresh pull basically drives that air box, and warm pull drives a switch valve basically. So you can shut off the coolant to the heater core so you don't get any heat through the firewall in the summertime. Not nice. thread. That side is just the headlines. So those are on, and they won't get lost, which is a good thing. You can still get them, but they're not the easiest. So back out I go. So we got our pedal box sitting here on our big old VFG. So there's 4 bolts that go through from the booster that hold it on, 3 from the clutch master that also hold it on. But really the only thing we can work with right now is these 2 lowers basically go to these captive nuts on the firewall. You can see where the other ones come through. But we can snug those up, that'll hold it in place. There are 2 more mounting bolts up here, but those are where the steering column bolts on, and we don't have the steering column yet, so those are just going to sit up above this here flange, so it'll rest here. You can actually put a couple bolts just to keep it centered, but otherwise it's going to be mainly those 2 on the back and this lip holding her up. That'll be enough to get the pedal box in, and then we can start jamming those master cylinders on, which will really snug it up, and then we'll be good to go when the steering column is ready to get dunked on. So, gonna get some hardware ready. Gonna put you back in the stand, and we'll try and one-hand that feller on up there. Oops. There it goes. Get in your home. You too. Get in your home. Well, got a nice shiny brake booster. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those ones where having an extra arm would be helpful. And an extra eyeball. So. So same deal, just a little bit smaller and lighter, and the bolts are the other way around. They got to come from firewall side. I do need to go look in the parts stash. There should be a similar pin that goes on the clutch pedal that I don't have in my mitts right now. Conveniently, I can look through this hole for the wire grommet, so that's fun. And boy, you need tiny little mitts for this guy. They don't give you a lot of room. I guess you could have put this one on first. Probably a pro tip. But that's life. She is still on the pedal. Actually, I wonder if you have to put this guy on first. Or does it clear? Well, that would be interesting. I think you do. Not the end of the world. But yeah, I do think you need to take the brake booster off. Well, booster's back off. It'll give us a little bit more room to get this clutch on. I'm interested to read the service manual to see if you actually have to take the brake booster off to change the clutch master. You might. I don't know how you would get a wrench of any sort on this upper bolt, basically, without having that booster gone. You can't even get a box end on it. So I would wager you have to pull that off. Why? I'm not sure, but alrighty, both of those fellers are back on. I gotta go hunt through the part stash, see if I can find that pin to go in the clutch pedal. I'll be right back. Found it. It was tucked on the old clutch master, just like I figured. I'm gonna go dunk that in, and we'll move on to the next one. Well, brake master on, clutch master on. Nice and new all in general. Got to do our brake line. Got to run our hard line still. Nice clean pedal assembly in there. Whoop. There's my missing washer. But otherwise, nice cleaned up. Rust is off them. Fresh pedal pads. Got to work on the gas pedal still. And we're going to have to shoot that steering column through. But first things first, I think we're going to start bending some lines, finish up this part of the house, because that's kind of one of the key ones to getting this feller back on here. So we got some brake lines straightened out from the spool. All the benders and crimpers and stuff are out, so we'll start there, start to work our way across, see what we can do. This is what we're looking at recreating. So these are the two brake lines that come from the top of the master and that proportion valve that comes from the clutch master. And they got all sorts of curly keys coming across. Goes across the firewall, pair drop down, and then you got an actual curly cue. Goes to that splitter block. I guess the distribution block is no splitting really. It's just a joining union. And then this guy is for the clutch. Goes to that soft line. So pretty curly little setup there. We'll see what we can do. This section follows the curve of the firewall there. Like I say, tucks up behind the motor. So it's good to get these done now. I think what I may do is put these old crusty ones kind of up against the firewall and mark off a mating point where that junction block is. Because right now it's kind of I know where it is, but if I can kind of just clamp up a plate to make me a shooting point for that. This one's a little more fluid because it's just that soft line. I think there's actually a clip on the firewall for that where the soft line dumps on. So that one actually should have an aiming point. But if we got that, then we can at least kind of bend it to match and work our way around the firewall and recreate these, because these aren't going back on. They could. They're actually serviceable. They're just ugly. And we got plenty of brake on the blade. So, like I say, I'm going to dunk these on, see where they land so I know how they run, and then we'll work on making new ones. So, see what we got. Well, there we at least got a better idea what we're shooting for. So this clutch kind of squirts past, just bends around, nothing too crazy. I do have the rear end line tucked in there. I'm guessing that's the rear with a proportioning adjustment. And that would be the rear cylinder. So they squirt across. They come basically to a mounting point right here. That clip. I think there's two holes. I think there are. anyway, there's a threaded mounting point there. There's a threaded mounting point here. So basically they tuck back along the firewall. There's a threaded mounting point here. Shoot down to that mounting point, and then they've got those curlicues. Like I thought, there is a mounting tab for that soft line coming up from the clutch slave, so that's going to be an easier point to hit. These guys aren't too bad to take in the ballpark. Obviously you got some play with that circle spring joint. That splitter block is here, or distribution block. It's roughly in line with this kicker, and then roughly straight down from your lines coming down. So it's not too hard to get those in the ballpark, and then you can kind of give them a little springy to get them right where they need to be. So not too bad. Definitely a lot of bends. We'll have to split these apart, and then likely do them one by one. Probably start with the clutch line by the looks of it. He's pretty independent. We get that run across, and then we can work the brake lines across. So I think that's a plan. Well, new day, another dollar. Pulled the clutch line apart from the brake lines. They got these little mounting clips basically. Peeled those open to split it apart where I needed to. Gives you a little better view of the shape. Just got it sitting upright because that's kind of how she sits. So you got to come down and around and over. Used a piece of just spare wire I had. It's actually a garage door opener sensor wire, so it's pretty flexible, kind of like phone cord. Use that to measure off how long this guy is with all his curves, and that let me cut off a reasonable stick of this 3/16. I'm going to flare the end and just kind of start working my way over. Pretty relatively straightforward, just a lot of measure, mark, bend, kind of lay it along the other guy. So we'll get started with the flare and start working our way around, get a couple bends in, layer back, see how it looks. We can keep working our way around. This guy's kind of got his own shape, so it's not too bad. The other two need to get at least sort of close to each other. A little fiddlier, and they got that pigtail curlicue. That's going to be a little bit fun. But anywho, I'm going to clip you in, going to start flaring and bending and see what you get. Well, got her all bent up. She's pretty close. Might need a little bit of fine tweaking when we get her on the firewall for the last time. I just got to nip this last bit off. Got her marked it from test fitting it, and then compared it as well to the original, and it seems like she's the same. That'll get us where we need to be for the soft line. So just got to nibble off this piece. These are definitely slow going. They could have put a few more bends in there, I think. Plunk. Got a good clean fitting. And got a whole brake line that, or I guess it's clutch line. Should be able to dunk on there. Might tuck it in the clips. I got the one clip on there, but I'll set her in the other two just to make sure everything sits appropriately. And then we'll use a little bit of acetone to get the permanent marker marks off. Nothing crazy. Well, I guess these tape marks can come off. So he's going to go there. Well, she's all clipped in, runs clear, runs across, tucks up nice against the firewall here. Clears. Might need a little bit of a tweak on this corner here just to make sure it doesn't rub, but we'll see when we get her in the final clips. And everything's snug down. Otherwise, shoots across, comes out kind of like the old one did, and down to our tabby tab for the soft line. Got our fittings on both ends. Should be good to go. Just need to give her a dab with the acetone to get rid of any of the permanent marker marks, just to clean her up. So one down, two more to go. I'm going to rip out those other two. Rip out loosely. They are a slow little job. Just a lot of finicky bends, and you got to get her to sit right. So I'm going to chip away at that. We'll probably bring it back when we're done. Well, we're back after a lot of bending and tweaking. Clean up the bracketry as well. A little bit of fiddly work there. I think we got her all tucked in. I ended up just using a piece of actually the exhaust tubing that we had in the exhaust at 2.5 inch. It was actually a really nice size just to wrap that around. This stuff, it bends pretty nice. That's just the fitting on the end rattling away. But otherwise, clutch line comes across nice. They match up nice on the corner. Everything's pretty well straight and kind of the way it's supposed to. I ended up making these follow the radius of the booster. I just used a paint can. They had a step, kind of like the clutch line, but rather than go through that, I just kind of made them match the booster. I'm sure when they do them on a machine and stuff, the steps are probably the easier way to do it than these big swooping radiuses. Radii? But doing it here, it was just easier to do those kind of matching pairs for the brake booster. Follows it up nice, kind of make them symmetrical. Otherwise, she comes all across, bolts up nice. We'll probably have to pop these lines off just to bleed these masters. Obviously they're empty. I don't need any stuff spilling around as we're flailing the tub about. I had her tipped sideways and back and forth again doing some of the dash work. But all in all, I think that's all we need to get on the firewall side. There is a regulator that goes here. It's probably that wire. I probably could snag that and dunk it in. I may go drag it out of the basement. Otherwise, the rest of these fittings are all inboard. There is one here I'll have to check. I think it's a hose fitting, so I can't really do much with that now. Same with these two up on the top. Those are for the heaters. Same way with this. This is that control valve. This guy comes over to that. I think I can get to that easy enough. So we'll let that be. The rest of these fittings are all inboard. And the heater box should have plenty of room without the fenders and front clip-on, so not too worried there. I do have it up to get it cleaned up. But as far as stuff that's kind of in the way once you get that engine block tucked in, it was mainly these brake lines and clutch lines. Those are the problem childs. Plus, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of room as you're bending it because you don't have it bent all the way. Otherwise, wiring loom's tucked in. Got to put the grommets in, but we'll do that last. I got to run some of the sniper stuff, so I haven't bothered with any of those grommets. Got them in a bag over on the bench. Most of the fiddly dash stuff is together where I could stand up in the hole and stick my noggin up in there. Got to do the steering column. I'm going to wait to get that on the chassis. And until I do that, I don't want to put the gauge cluster in. That one's pretty straightforward. All of it kind of tucks out the front. It's a little fiddly to get it to clip, but we're okay there. Pedal box is all in. Springs are on. Heater's got to wait for the trans tunnel to go in, so I think we're good there. And the heater box comes across there, so I think we're pretty decent. There's going to be a little bit of stuff that you got to crawl around, but all in all, we got what we could while we can do it. I did run some heat shielding. You can kind of see it under there. Normally they've got tins that go for the exhaust. This tub doesn't seem to have the bolting bracketry, and those tins are long gone, and they're donated themselves to the dirt roads of central Wisconsin over the years, rusting away. I don't remember them ever being on there in the last 30 years. So went with the adhesive reflective material. We'll see how that goes. Realistically, I mean, even today they probably would use something like that versus a metal shield. So we'll give her a go, see how she does. Worst case, you can always put the shield on and still have the reflective kind of belt suspenders. But we're sitting pretty good there. I think the only thing left that I'm going to do before we swing around over to the chassis is dunk those flares on, because I can work and get my mitts in here, tip it up and all that stuff to get the hardware on, rather than trying to do that with these BFGs in my face. So I'm going to peel back this blue. I'm going to go snag those flares from the storage, and we'll see if we can get those tucked in and on. So I think that's probably the last bit though, and then we can start to look at what it takes to get this guy scooched over, this guy out the door, and kind of back together. Otherwise, one last sweep of the chassis. Everything's tucked up on the rear bumper. You do have to have the rear lights out, because you got to get in here to get that body mount bolt on. So the rear lights are out. We're going to have to reach in and do those a little bit under the tub, but that's not bad. Otherwise, everything back here should be snugged up. All this hardware is done. Exhaust is all mounted, snug. As you can tell, she's got a couple heat cycles on her. Everything's sitting pretty good there. Drive line's all in. I did have a weep on my front seal for the transfer case, which was good timing to notice that. Everything here got fresh fluids, and when we did filter back up to the top, the front seal on the transfer case started weeping. So $6, $10 seal later, plop that out, plop it back in. She's dry today, so no leaks there. Everything's pretty good here. I do have to pull the shifter out so you can set the tub on without this guy in your teeth. Easy enough to do. It's whatever, 6 bolts. There is a tool that snap on, pop out, and this cup comes off. I don't have it. I tried to make one, and it's just a bear. It's just easier to pop these 6 and pull the whole shifter assembly out. Otherwise, everything here is tied up. Speedo cables run through. Emergency brake cables run through. All the starter wiring and stuff is good. And then once you get up to here, and you're kind of back in the open, that firewall comes up to about here, I guess. There's where those curlicues meet up back on the frame rail. So that's basically where your firewall knee starts, is right about here. So stuff like the starter, this clutch slave is a bit of a bear. But I think we're looking pretty good. I did pull all the wiring off the sniper to get that out of the way, so everything's unplugged and just sitting up here, so there's nothing running. We'll have to figure that out when the firewall's on. This guy's just here to be a placeholder. There's that e-brake cable. But he's got his routing on, so he's got his clips and stuff, so he's sitting pretty good. Got my Speedo clips on. It's should be, we'll give her another tweak. So that guy should be good. These run up to, kind of come up through that trans tunnel for like the gas tank sender, and I want to say something with the rear heater. I think it's the rear heater fan maybe. But those got to come up under, so those are good. So manifolds, they're riding good. I haven't noticed any exhaust leaks there. Everything's kind of good running back, so pretty happy there. So I think we are sitting pretty good. Kind of just that one last sweep. I've debated putting the old skins back on just to drop that back end down a couple inches. I don't think we're going to need it. If I look across, the bumper clears underneath everything on that body hoist, because we did lift the tub up after I pulled it off. So we're good there. We should be able to back this guy right back under. And I got some straps to pick up the front, so you can leave this back hoist or back rotisserie, pull the front out, push it under. Should be good to go. So all in all, not too shabby. All right, time to dunk on those fender flares and see how we do there. Then hopefully by the end of the day we'll have a tub on a chassis and something that looks more like a vehicle. Onward. Well, I got the plastic peeled off. I did run a little strip of that 3M just kind of clear body protector film, just where you might have a little bit of an interference fit. It's pretty thin. Should still let us scooch up in there. I also did put a real thin piece of basically high density foam, white. Kind of followed the contour where it's going to ride on the tub so you don't get a rub mark on the paint there. Worst case, should be able to buff it out, but it should give you a little better ride there. Theoretically, these guys should fit up in there. Well, there's a first look at how they sit before we bother to put everything on there. Guess we'll see when we get her on the frame. She's got to get sucked up a little bit. She's hanging down, but all in all, not too bad. Kind of like it. Let's get the rest of the hardware in there, and we'll see what we got. Boink, back in your home. That's one down. Just a couple little stainless button head Allen screws. They are a standard. They're a 1032, I think, so it's probably the only non-metric fastener on the rig, but that's all right. They do sit up pretty nice. The nice thing is you can take them off. They're not permanent. Obviously, it's a little fiddly to get them to sit right and clip on that way. But it is nice to be able to pull those off. Not everybody likes them. Heck, I don't even know if I like them yet. We'll see when we're on there. But it is nice to pull those off. The factory, I think the JDM spec ones, they just weld them on. And the other thing they do is they actually drop them down so they come off that lip and down versus up off the lip. So it's a little easier because they just kind of pinch to that seam and come on down. The negative part of that they do is it drops your wheel well kind of in and back. So if you already got 32s instead of 29s, obviously you don't really want to be dropping that wheel well. That's kind of the opposite of the point. I think they did them for tax reasons. It's one of those funny things of the JDM world. Anywho, one on. I'm going to go jump around, do the other side, same deal, laying on the floor, working those in to get them to sit right, and then probably take a quick beverage break, and then we'll look at getting her on the chassis. On to it. Well, there it is. Driver's side's on. Tucks up pretty good. Again, kind of same deal. Put a little 3M rock guard on the actual tub, just so this guy doesn't rub. And then I got that same high density type foam. Hopefully it stays fairly clean. It's kind of that rubbery foam. If not, they can always come back off and replace it. Again, kind of the same 4 button head fasteners. But all in all, pretty good. I'll take it. That should be the last bit that I need the tub on the rotisserie, at least mainly. I'm definitely glad I put those on without those meats in the way. It was nice to be able to stick your noggin up in there and work and see where the bolts are and stuff. So, he's over there, he's over there. They need to not be that way. Time to make that happen. So what I did when I took it off the first time for paint, basically they've got these big drain holes in the floor. This rope is a little dirty. And I just got this big soft rope. The nice thing is you can bring it on across. And you can tuck this guy through this hole and basically tie a knot underneath. And it does give you a place to pick up with something soft. Like, friend, that isn't going to hurt anything. It lets me suspend the front of the tub with the chain hoist, basically. So then we can get rid of the front half of the rotisserie, leave the back of the tub on the rotisserie, and we should be able to set her on down. So just to make sure there's nothing in the way, pulled the main shifter. That one definitely hits. I think the transfer case one is actually kind of problematic too. So just pulled that bolt, laid that one forward. That one's pretty easy, got a linkage. Like I say, I just pulled the top cover on this guy. Technically there's a funny little tool that you can just pull the lever out, but it's only going to be a minute or two. So we can pull that cover slider back and put the cover right back on. So not too worried about that. Next up, I got to lift a little bit more and unbolt this end of the rotisserie. Should be able to just slowly lift her up off those forks. Provided we got her stable, we can then slide those forks out, get them out of the way, and we should be clear to push this chassis back underneath as long as we can get enough lift out of the front of the tub. So we'll see what we got. So we've landed with our body mounts on the front at least. The firewall's kicked forward a little bit, so she's pretty snug by the motor because the back end's tipped up. But both sides are sitting where they need to, so we're getting closer. Gotta get the rear unbolted, pick her up and drop her on down, so it's getting there. So rather than the Armstrong method, got the long throw bottle jack. It's actually got outriggers for aircraft lifting. Just kind of one of those funny ones for aircraft wings. They got a little nub on them and you pick them up that way. But it should give me enough throw to reach up through behind the bumper and in front of the exhaust. And you can kind of see it coming up. I'm just going to use the old clutch clutch pedal rubber to avoid dingling up the tub. But that should give us just enough lift to get this rotisserie backing out of the way, and then we can kind of let it down gently. And it should also let me get my other two body mounts tucked in as well. Right now the outriggers are using the inner two body mounts, so I can't tuck them on. But once I get this lifted up, those little stubs of tech tubing that I used as spacers should drop off, and we should be able to drop those last two main body mounts on, so then when we set it down there, it should be all tucked in. Not that you can't get them in after the fact. The back fits pretty easy. But we've got corn tacked. We are lifting a little bit off center. Actually, I could have over a little bit more, maybe. But I might just ride with that. We'll see. Yeah, she's cleared. So we are clear of our outriggers. Really, that's all we need. And yeah, I'll be glad when this guy's out of the way. I've been walking around him for months. And this guy goes here. And you should be able to start easing around now. Nothing really in the way. One thing we do want to watch is this corner, because it would catch on the bumper. I think we got to come my way just a skosh. Still sitting pretty good. And they're sitting pretty good. Plenty of room on this side. Plenty of room on this side. That's looking pretty close. Well, it's a little bit blue, but that is the first time that's been all back together in a while, at least in a form that's supposed to be. Everything's sitting pretty good. Shuffled the tub a little bit left and right to get it centered. I think the flares are going to work out pretty good. I don't know how easy it's going to be on camera, but basically you can kind of see they go right out to the edge of the tire. So it gives you a little bit extra coverage that you would normally have been flinging a few rocks with those. It's pretty good there. Got your clearance again on your back of your engine, so everything's sitting pretty good there. Our brake lines are pretty darn close, so we'll be able to wrangle those in. So he's got to go up to the front, he's got to go to the back, but those are pretty darn close. You've got some springy to work with. Same with the clutch line, he's got to go up there, but that's fine. So everything's doing what it's supposed to. We'll see how that front clip goes on. It is not the most fun, but she is back together. I do need to paint the trans tunnel cover, but I was kind of waiting to get everything pushed outside. Now that this puppy's all back on wheels, I can roll it out in the driveway and use this as a paint shop again, because I do have the gas tank lid and the trans tunnel to do. Interestingly enough, the trans tunnel still has the factory pads on it, and they're actually in pretty darn good shape. So it's kind of a fun one. Normally those get pretty chewed up, so we'll have to watch those when we blast it. But those are the two main pieces to get done, and then we can start jamming the interior stuff's back in because you need that gas tank that sits here in that lid, trans tunnel there that covers that up. Then you can dunk stuff like the heater and all that jazz back in. So that's going to be coming up shortly, is just to get those jammed out. And obviously I got to go under and bolt up all the body mounts, get those fired in. But I'll take it. Oofta. So that's a pretty major milestone today. Drivetrain's all in. Everything's buttoned up underneath. So we're good on the chassis, and got the main tub all settled back on. A lot of the fiddly stuff under the dash is done, so that's a pretty big step forward too. That stuff's not the most entertaining. But otherwise, like I say, just got to button up a few things to get it really locked down. Gonna have to do a little bit of paint, but then we can start jamming on getting the interior bits back in. I do need to do some fiddly stuff. Well, hello, friend. Got to paint the roll bar. That's another one of those parts of the interior. But otherwise, all the seats and stuff are done. So pretty good there. A little bit of touch-up work on stuff like the steering column. But definitely on the path to putting parts back on the rig and out of the basement, out of the house. Clearing up some space and getting it looking more like a rig again. So that's going to do it for today. Thanks for riding along, making some progress. I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Wow, what are you doing way down there? Oh, got some new... Boy, everything's in the way today. Huh.